And welcome to NIFA's Webinar Wednesdays, a weekly virtual series specifically designed for Nebraska communities and housing partners. Today we'll be discussing the topic of building landlord relationships. My name is John Turner, Manager of Community Development Research at the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority. Also joining me today is Susan Pullis of NIFA. She is behind the scenes helping to monitor the chat and answer questions. So due to the pandemic, NIFA has decided to postpone our 2021 annual Housing Innovation Marketplace Conference until March 28th through the 30th, 2022, so mark your calendars. Instead, we're going to be bringing you weekly webinars all of 2021. So I'm excited today, we have a great topic. Our panelists today are Judy Pederson, owner of Pro Printing and Graphics in North Platte and Commissioner of the Nebraska Commission on Housing and Homelessness. Bodeen is the Executive Director of the Lincoln County Community Development Corporation. Retha Knapp is the lead housing locator with Talbot Kitchen Outreach. And Randy McCoy is the Executive Director of the Metro Area Continuum of Care for the Homeless. You might have heard it referred to as MACCH. And Randy's newly appointed commissioner also on the Commission on Housing and Homelessness. So congratulations again on that. And I myself is on that commission, so I'm honored to work with both of you. So we would like attendees to save all questions until the end of the presentation. You can use the question feature on the right to input your questions, and NIFA staff will hold those until the end of the presentation. If you would prefer to ask your question, you can raise your hand on the webinar feature, and then we can unmute you and you can ask at that time. So thanks again to everybody who is attending. And I think before we begin our presentations, let's start with a poll. And I'm going to ask Susan if she can get that uploaded now. We'd like to gauge who our audience is today. All right, I think we're just taking some time to do that. All right, for some reason, I cannot see it, Susan. So what is people looking like, Susan?
It looks like 22% are landlord or property managers. 37% is social workers, case managers, or housing locators. And then the remainder is basically an other category. We do have a few attorneys and healthcare providers on board today.
Okay, very good. All right, so why don't we get started, and I'm going to hand it over to Carol and Judy, and hopefully, can you guys see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, here we go. I'll pull that up, start the slideshow. Here we go. Okay, take it away, Judy.
All right. Well, first off, I would like to take this opportunity to thank John and Susan and the others at NIFA that have been putting on these webinars. I've been a frequent attendee of the webinars over these last months and have found just the variety of topics and different things very helpful. And so just kudos initially to NIFA for doing this. As John said, I'm the Executive Director of Lincoln County Community Development in North Platte, and have been involved with housing really since probably in the 2000s. I was initially with the North Platte Chamber and Development Corporation, and back in 2010. And John, you can, if you'd like to go ahead and advance to the next slide. Okay. Back in 2010, I actually was at the Chamber and Development, and it had been a few years since we had done a housing study, and so there was a healthy partnership in the community to get a housing study going, and it showed a lot of the problems that I think we were starting to see that we were having. Very much a lot of substandard housing, and you know, we were starting to see just the lack of housing lack of housing in many areas. Obviously, there was the lack of affordable housing that was in good shape and at a place that people could feel safe in being in. Also accessible housing. I had an elderly father at that time that we had thought initially was going to have to move to an apartment, and there just really wasn't anything available. So this has been something that's been going on in our community for quite some time. At that point, there was a housing task force that was put together, and a mayor's task force. Judy was very involved in all of that, and also my predecessor, Nancy Strebel, of Lincoln County Community Development. So things got started, and you know, a lot of work. Landlords was one of the issues that we were dealing with, because of the lack of housing. Some landlords could get away with maybe charging more than what they should be charging, and not keeping up their properties the way that they should be keeping them up. And that was leading to a lot of the issues of our substandard housing. So moving on, we did an updated housing study in 2018. And it really came at it from a different direction, in that it identified all of these issues that had been continuing and that really had not been dealt with. And it was much more specific in putting things forward as to what the community needed to do and who needed to do it. And it didn't sugarcoat some things, and it really brought some things to attention that needed to be dealt with. And you know, as we said, there's a lot of good landlords out there, and we don't want to put them all into the same bucket. But obviously there were issues. So at that time, and throughout all of this, Judy's been very integral in front of the scenes and behind the scenes in working with this issue, and she's been tireless. And so I'm going to turn it over to Judy at this point and let her talk about some of the efforts and things that have been worked on over these years, and kind of was leading up to us putting together the landlord study. So John, I think you can move to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Judy.
Okay, thank you, Carol. And thank you, John and Susan and NIFA. As Carol said, these things have been so helpful. I participate often, so thank you very much for doing this. As Carol was saying, 2018 was really kind of a shock to us. It wasn't like we didn't know it, but when you see that experts come in with some really specific, very specific data about what is happening in our community and has been for some time, it is really kind of shocking. It's not like people in the North Platte area don't care, but there wasn't a systematic plan or anything to address what was happening. And that was one thing that was so nice about the study in 2018, is that they really kind of laid it out for us and said, you know, this is what you need to do. The problem was no one picked that up and started really focusing on that. I was a part of a group of local business owners, some school administration, hospital administration, that came together and said, you know, really, what are we going to do? This is impacting the hospital tremendously. It's one of the things that you don't right off think about necessarily, but when housing conditions get so poor, that living conditions are so poor for people, their health is impacted. And so the hospital was seeing significant issues coming into ER and into the hospital that really was because of the living environment for people in our community. That was just pretty shocking. The other thing that was happening was the schools, seeing the students as they are trying to learn and focus, and the impact that their housing, the housing was having on them. One thing that has changed for both the hospital and the school here in our community is they both go into the home of for the school, their students, and for the hospital, into the homes of patients who have been discharged. And so they had a lot of specific information, not as to names and all of that, but as to really the conditions, some of these things. So we started having some meetings with city administration to say, you know, what really can we do about this? How can we get change? And through a process of some changes that happened at City Hall, but also just really sharing the concern that that we had and we were seeing, they decided to do a complete overhaul of the maintenance code. And I participated in that this past summer. We had a number of people on that from the city, and really went through the property maintenance codes as they related to single-family homes, to multifamily, and I think we had 8 or 10 meetings on that. Then had to take it to Planning Commission a couple of times, and then to City Council. So it was quite a process, but it was really a good process, and we felt like we really made significant inroads into getting the codes where they needed to be, and then the next part of that was getting a process in place for enforcement of those. So at that time, Carol and I started to talk about, you know, as she said, we have some really good landlords in North Platte, and we have some not so good. But even the ones who you know, care about their properties, care about their tenants, you know, how do we need to get this information out to them of, you know, the codes are changing, we're in a pandemic now, they may not be getting rent, you know, and what can we do about that? So that's kind of how we started down the path to look towards the Landlord Summit. So I'll turn it back over to Carol. She's going to talk some more about that. So John, if you would advance to the next slide, that would be great.
Well, basically, so Judy came to me and talked to me about the Landlord Summit idea and the example that she had been introduced through her work on the Housing and Homeless Commission, and that it looked like this is something that we could put together for our area. And I thought it was a great idea. Lincoln County Community Development is actually a landlord as well. We have about 18 rental properties that we manage, that we own and manage, that are rented out to low to moderate income. And it's part of our income stream to kind of help the sustainability of our organization so that we're not completely dependent upon our grant funding and all of that, that we have some sustainable income that comes in. So we're definitely a part of the landlord community as well. And so we understand what landlords deal with, that it's a two-way street. And so just as there are good and bad landlords, there are good and bad tenants. And so when Judy brought the idea to me, I was very much on board to work with her on it. Judy did a lot of the legwork in putting the summit together. We were in the midst of moving our office at that time. And so we were moving from an office that we had been in for over 15 years. And so I was kind of in the midst of boxes and kind of not knowing where things were from day to day. And so Judy did a lot of the legwork, but we felt like it was just really good timing with the CARES Act funding. we had just had our strategic planning with our board of directors, and that was a question that came up in that meeting as well, is that, you know, we're talking about all of the things that landlords need to do and how they need to keep up with these new codes, and they need to be better at keeping up their properties. But what are the resources for our landlords? And while, you know, we really feel like, you know, yes, a landlord is a business, and that it should be a part of their business plan to keep up their properties and to deal with the things that are coming along the, you know, that are causing them issues. However, as we know, this year was way beyond, you know, any sense of normal. And so I really liked Judy's idea of, let's reach out to these landlords, and, you know, let's not just be always saying, well, you need to do this and you need to do that, but let's try to get them together and get some information out and show that there are resources out there. And so we put it together as a Zoom and got the link out there. We had some really good press, and then we were able to have a recording of it as well. So Judy, do you want to add more on putting that together, since you did a lot of the initial work on it? So
Sure, that's great. Thank you. John Turner was actually on there and talked about NIFA and the programs that NIFA has. We had some people attending from Community Action Partners, and so they presented as well. We just had a variety of persons participating. City of North Platte participated, you know, and listening in. We had a lot of our smaller landlords in the community that were listening in to and participating in the summit. So we really felt like we got some really good information out. I know one of our smaller landlords owns a few properties, and is also a realtor. And he had used the CARES Act and talked about how significant that was and the tracking. And we had, I can't remember now, she's from West Central District Development Department, I believe is the name. They had worked significantly with the CARES Act funding and with landlords. And so she participated and spoke. It really came together very well. I think we had 35 to 40 people on, and you know, just our real goal was just to get this information out there and let the landlords know that there is support. To also educate them on if their tenant maybe doesn't know about some assistance that they could be using, that they can get that information to their tenants. So really just wanted to provide a way to reach out to them and say, you know, we're here to help you however we can. There was a short timeline to use those funds, so we wanted to make sure that they knew that and they had the opportunity to obtain that funding. So that's really kind of how we put it together. You know, all of these things, when you start looking at something that's taken you 10 to 15 years to get to a place, it's going to take you a number of years to get back out of that. So we know that we have a long way to go, but we just felt like this was a good way to open that communication. There may or may not be funds available in the future for them, but we do know now where the resources are, the different entities and agencies that they can contact to ask for assistance if they need that, or if their tenant needs it.
Yeah.
One of the partners that we worked with was Legal Aid of Nebraska. Jeff Easton is our local attorney here for them. Jeff has been a great assistant working with tenants and providing information. So Legal Aid was also participating.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, and then after the fact, the link for the recording of the summit was also out there, and so we don't know how many people, you know, or other landlords that maybe didn't know about it as we were getting ready to put it on were maybe able to access that information after the fact. But we just felt like that having it, I think we got more participation with it being in a Zoom format than maybe if it had been in the old days and we'd had a getting people together, because it's always hard to find time and location that is convenient for people. And so I think that was a great idea that Judy had to do this now and as a Zoom, so that we could maybe reach people that we wouldn't reach in other formats. So.
Yeah, and a number of our smaller, our landlords that have a smaller number of rentals have other jobs and other occupations. So I know one's a teacher, one's a photographer. You know, there were several that were on who that's not their primary income, and so it did help to be able to hold it that way. And so we're looking forward to the future. It would be great to do something, you know, in 6 or 8 months and kind of reach out to them again and see if some of that was helpful, if they, you know, continue to reach out to the different agencies and things that that were on the Zoom that day, and to see, you know, what their needs are now, you know, how they're doing. We want them to succeed. We want our housing stock to be good. We want them to have a good, successful business, and we want them to provide a good place. There's a lot of people who need to be able to rent where they live, and so we want that to be the experience.
Yep. So I think, John, I think you can move it to the next slide, our final one that just has our contact information and any questions. I don't have anything more to add. Judy, do you have anything more?
No, I think that's it. If someone has some questions, it will be available.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And let me pull up Retha's presentation. Yes, so thank you, and that was a great event, and I was glad to be a part of it. Look forward to asking some questions later. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Retha now.
All right, so I need to turn my webcam back on.
Yes. You need me to help?
Hey,
I can. All right, there you are.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Very
good morning,
good.
everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Retha, again, with Talbot Kitchen and Outreach. I'm the lead housing locator here and part of the Landlord Liaison Program. And I'm going to talk about 4 key points that I feel are important for building and maintaining good relationships with landlords. So the next slide, John, the 4 key points that I'm going to talk about is honesty, keeping communications ongoing, contingency and mitigation funds, and mediation. So John, if you want to go to the next slide. So honesty, just being upfront. I feel being upfront and honest with the landlord is important, and we encourage our clients to do the same. The landlord's going to find out eventually about any past or ongoing issues, whether it's from a background check that they do at the time the person's applying, or later on after the person has been renting for a while and the landlord is getting complaints from neighbors or seeing a number of police calls coming from the client's address. So honesty saves everyone's time. I'll have landlords, that's like the first thing they'll ask me when I do refer someone to them that's applying. They're like, so tell me about this person. So I think letting that landlord know that we are already aware of some issues and just reassuring the landlord that we are staying on top of it and working on solutions with the client. And then letting the landlord know upfront what he might find on that background check when the client applies for an apartment. Just again, lets that landlord know we are already aware of some of the past issues. And at that time, then we can then advocate for the client and let the landlord know that there's a case manager working with the client. knows about the client's past, has been working with them for a while, and that hopefully these same issues won't happen again since that case manager is involved. And then once we get a client housed, we just don't just drop him off and say, good luck, and never talk to the client or landlord again. That's where we like to keep the communication going. So John, if you want to go to the next slide. So just keeping that communication ongoing is important. We like to check in with the landlords every so often just to make sure everything is going okay. Even with those landlords we may not have someone housed with right now, it just reminds the landlord that we are still around and available if they need anything. And once in a while I get really lucky and they might have some new apartments coming open, and that's some good leads for me to be able to refer people to. It also helps because the landlord may be having another tenant that's having issues and needing help with resources and just doesn't know who to turn to. So he or she can pick your brain on how to help this person. And I find that I'll have landlords calling me just saying, oh, this person's really struggling either with their mental health or they can't pay rent or that type of thing. And they'll just like, who can I refer them to? And that's a good opportunity for us, to keep that communication open. Oh, John, can you get to that next slide? So anyway, I use different forms. Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's not that one, but that's okay. We'll get to that one in just a little bit. I use different forms of keeping communication open with the landlords. It can be any form, like an email, phone call, or dropping by their office with popcorn or cookies. That's actually my favorite way of keeping communication open because it puts a smile on their face. But it's also just showing appreciation for all they do and thanking them for their willingness to work with our population. So even just a thank you note to the landlord is appreciated. And it's important that that communication between the client and the landlord continues as well. So again, we encourage our clients to continue to, keep in communication with their landlord, especially if they've had any issues that need to be addressed, or just let the landlord know how much they appreciate how the building is kept in good shape, or that they have quiet neighbors and that there aren't any issues. So again, that ongoing communication is really important. So then the third key point is the contingency or mitigation funds. So here at Matt Talbot, we have the program called the Landlord Liaison Program, and we do have contingency or mitigation funds available, which is helpful. These funds can be an effective piece of your overall landlord engagement strategy, also referred to as a landlord guarantee or risk reduction funds. They're an added protection for landlords willing to rent to someone with limited income, a poor rental history, or criminal history. And the funds can cover excessive damages to the rental unit, lost rent, or legal fees beyond the security deposit. And then, although we have offered these funds to some of our landlords when damages have occurred, we've had several landlords turn down the money, but just offering it to them again allows us to keep a good relationship with the landlord. And sometimes, of course, we can't always cover the full amount of what damages there might be, but we can offer a certain amount, or even the times like when a client loses a key and the landlord needs to charge them for that, then that's again just a small amount that we can pay and keep that communication going with that landlord as well. And then the last key point I want to bring up, that's the next slide, John. Yes, thank you. That is the mediation. So Reg, my coworker, he brought up a really good point the other day. When we are working with our clients, we are basically taking on a multidisciplinary approach with the client. And we have the landlord, the case manager, and everyone else that's involved trying to offer resources for this client so that they can be successful in maintaining their housing and moving forward with their goals. So with the Landlord Liaison Program, we can help with any mediation between the landlord and the client with the help of the case manager to work on resolving any issues that may come up and maybe aren't being addressed in a timely manner. So as an example, a client may be getting upset because a repair they have reported hasn't been fixed. And again, kind of depends, did that client call, did he leave a message? But it helps us kind of follow up. So where are we at with that process? And sometimes you get where the client or the tenant is calling the landlord and chewing the landlord out and demanding that this repair be done. And maybe if they're paying a portion of their rent, they are threatening to not pay their portion of their rent, kind of thing. And that's not going to go over very well when you are making threats like that. Or maybe the landlord's having issues. He's getting a lot of police calls or complaints from neighbors with this tenant. And that's where we can help step in and kind of get everybody's information, their side of the story. And then as a liaison or a mediator, then we can come in and let's say, okay, let's sit down and talk about this and let's find a solution to this problem. And sometimes it's just a real simple phone call and the problem's taken care of. But this is where the landlord liaison can either work with the case manager. We try not to bring the client in, just get the case manager's information from the client. But I know sometimes that's not always easy. But if you don't have a landlord liaison, a case manager can do this, or if they're not comfortable with it, maybe a supervisor could step into this role as well. But again, that mediation, just having someone a little bit unbiased and kind of in the middle, talking between the landlord and helping resolving that problem that the tenant is having. And so my next slide is my conclusion. The contingency funds and mediation are helpful incentives, but I feel the two biggest key points, as I pointed out earlier, is just really when building a landlord relationship is being honest and upfront, and then just keeping communication ongoing. And I think that this will all help keep that key remain in your client's hands. And that's great. We'll have a chance to answer questions at the end of all of this. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Retha. Now we will turn it over to Randy McCoy. Randy, if you want to turn your webcam on. If not, I can do it for you. All right, very good. Take it away.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today, and thanks to everybody for participating today. I don't have a PowerPoint slide just because most of the things that I would say would echo what has already been said. For those of us who are working in communities to try to end homelessness, to increase housing stability for households, it is critically important that we have landlords to work with and landlords who are understanding of the needs of the clients that we have, some of the barriers that they bring to the table. And the key to doing that is building those relationships. In the Omaha Metro, we have worked on this for a number of years. We have an annual event where we invite a bunch of landlords, property managers, housing providers together to discuss the programs that we have, what the requirements are and things like that, how we can be of assistance. One of the things that we have heard and are always trying to work on is that landlords want information to be clear and simplified. If there is one thing that we have in the housing and homelessness world, it is lots of acronyms and lots of internal speak that is very meaningful and relevant to us, but to a lot of people doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. And so being able to create documents or create a website or a platform that really is clear and simplified so that property managers, landlords understand what we have to offer from our side and what we are requesting or needing from them in that partnership is really important. And it's not just upfront, it is that ongoing conversation. It is being there for those situations that pop up. One of the other things that we have done in the Omaha community, it's already been talked about, is sort of a damages mitigation fund. It is available, but we're always trying to make it easier to access, to be able to provide for additional damages that might happen that are sort of outside of the normal the normal things that would happen in working with folks that we are referring in. I think the other thing, and this is more for the providers, and it's just my personal experience, but I would say it is kind of a best practice or a best recommendation for the providers in the room. But that is, if you can have somebody within your agency that is that link between landlords and property owners and the programs and the case managers. It is a very difficult task sometimes to walk that line between being a client advocate or an advocate for the landlord. But having somebody within your agency who takes on that responsibility and is really looking out, that is that middle person, that liaison between the two. Let the case managers be the advocate for the client. Let the property manager, the property liaison, the landlord engagement specialist be that advocate between the two to help have those conversations, to help discuss the situations that arise, and be that voice, sometimes not just for the landlord, but to help mitigate any of those conflicts that may arise. One of the things that we're trying to work on here is how do we do ongoing education, not only for landlords and property managers, but for the programs and the staff that work in the programs. So how do we update people on changes in the service provision that is available, or funds that are available? How do we update people on changes in landlord-tenant law or requirements that landlords have to face? And so it's always important to keep that communication open, keep that engagement happening, not just once a year or twice a year during specific events, but all the time. I don't know. I think everything else that I would say has kind of already been discussed, and just kind of be echoing it. So, John, if there are questions, maybe that would be better. John?
Randy, I'm not sure where John is, but if the rest of the panel would like to join you again, we do have a couple questions. The first question is there a legal or generally accepted definition for substandard housing? And what is the source for this? Anyone want to tackle that question?
I guess I'm not aware of a legal definition for it. In our community and during the housing studies, in both housing studies, they actually did, drove through the neighborhoods and documented the houses. Also were able to go on county assessor sites, and the housing stock is graded on there as to, very good down to poor condition. So I think that was used in the housing studies, and then a lot of visual documentation of what was considered substandard. It was, a lot of it is obvious just in driving by it. And I guess with our community being small enough, that was really able to be done. You can drive through the neighborhoods and identify the properties that are obviously in need of rehabilitation. So, Judy, do you have anything to add on that as well?
No, I think you're exactly right. That picture that I had on the PowerPoint is a house, place right now that we're working with, and peeling paint, disintegrating foundations, walls caving in, boarded up windows. Some of it goes back to the ordinances and the property maintenance codes and things, but
Yeah.
those were the
Well,
things
and then
that
the
they were looking.
reports back from the school system and the hospital, and that, you know, the reports that you would get that there's, you know, they didn't have running water, or they didn't have, you know, they didn't have heat or that type of thing. So.
And again, I'm with Judy and Carol. I don't know the legal definition, but we have what we use as a HUD housing inspection. So that does look at the exterior and the interior. And, you know, it's really pretty basic, but it's, you know, have to have hot running water and the fire alarms and just different things like that too. So, I mean, there is an inspection that you can use to also help with that to make sure that it is meeting the standard of everyone's housing.
Kind of to piggyback on that just a little bit, depending on the program funding source, there are different requirements. So, you know, if it's a Section 8 voucher or a housing choice voucher, you would have to go through the housing quality standards that the housing authorities do. But even for HUD or VA funded programs, there are checklists that we have to follow. And Retha's absolutely right. Running water, you know, heat, air conditioners that work, you know, windows that aren't broken and hanging out, water not dripping from the ceiling, outlets that work and things like that. Some of them, I mean, some like HQS, housing quality standards, I mean, they can get pretty specific. You know, you can't have a cracked cover on a light switch. That could be grounds to fail, but I mean, they're pretty much the basic things.
Yeah, and like Carol had said, some of our information comes, you know, came from like hospital people too. But the one young man was in the hospital a lot because he had diabetes, but they didn't have any electricity, and so there was no way for him to keep his insulin cold and things. So you know, we see that kind of thing. We see people with electric cords strung across from somebody else's house, hoses strung across from somebody else's house. That's how they get their electricity. That's how they get their water. So those were things that were taken into consideration as well.
Yep. Also, the development districts that run some of the nuisance and abatement programs in the communities as well would have a list. The minimum rehab standards on the NDED website. So I think there's a lot of resources out there.
Well, it looks like we had an additional response from one of our, John is having technical glitches right now with audio, so this is Susan Polis, I'm kind of filling in.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we do have audio for you now,
Okay,
John.
good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what, for some reason GoToWebinar said goodbye, and I'm on my phone now, so I can hear everyone. Thanks, Susan, for covering.
Not a problem.
And go ahead. I'll let you keep going with the questions for now.
Oh, not a problem. We do have one quick addition to that from one of our attendees that reminded us that the Nebraska Community Development Law sets standards for what substandard and blighted housing are for the broad property spectrum, but it's reflected usually on the city's minimum housing quality standard, and for communities without a building code, they default back to the state housing code. So I just wanted to bring that up. There is another question on how is the landlord contingency program funded? Can you talk a little bit about that? And I think they might be referring to Retha's landlord liaison program.
All right, so that is grant money that we have received and budgeted into our accounts. So, and I have to apologize, I'm not real sure on where exactly the grant money came from, but it's something that we've had now since the beginning of the program, which has been about 3 to 4 years now.
Thank you. Somebody else was wondering if funds are available for landlords for damage beyond the amount of the deposits, and how does a landlord apply for those funds? Are any of you aware of opportunities for that?
No, I would say we've gotten that question before as well from the community. I'm not aware.
Yeah, the landlords that partner with our program, you know, that, like I said, we do have some funding available. We can't always cover all the damages. Sometimes it is beyond the amount of the deposit, and we can, you know, assist with that too. But I don't know that there's like a grant or anything out there statewide or citywide that would be available for anyone that's not partnering with another program such as ours.
Kind of like what Retha was just saying, there's some very limited opportunity for some damage mitigation in the Omaha area. There's a specific application process. It is small amount. I mean, it wouldn't probably pay if there was excessive damages. The other thing is, though, depending on the funding source of the program, so HUD funded PSH or rapid rehousing program, and some of the others through the VA, there are opportunities to do things like double deposits, and that could offset, you know, damages or damage to the property, or different things like that within the funding streams that allow for some additional opportunities outside the regular deposits. But again, if it was something, you know, really, if it was a $10,000 repair, it wouldn't be able to cover all of that.
Well, and the last question I have is one of our attendees is wondering what it would take to bring something to Nebraska similar to the hotels that are being transformed to housing for the homeless that's going on in California and Texas. Any thoughts on that from the panel?
So I sit on our property resolution team that the mayor has here in North Platte. And that's one thing that we're looking at right now. We have a number of our older motels that are now doing monthly rent. And so I don't know if this is the direction that question is going, but they are now going to be inspected as a multifamily dwelling. So instead of being inspected along the state guidelines for a hotel, which I think is the fire marshal inspection annually, they will have an annual inspection now from the city, and it will be inspected and expected to meet the codes of a multifamily dwelling.
I think that would be a great idea if somebody wanted to take that project on and do that. I think what you would really need is you would need an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit developer, to come in to do an acquisition rehab project. I think you would definitely want to work with NIFA to see what funding streams are available, whether it's LIHTC, whether it's maybe a 4% tax credit deal. I don't know if you can make a 4% work, but definitely LIHTC, maybe some state home funds or something like that. But yeah, definitely a developer or an organization that is pretty well versed in doing development work. I think it would be great. Who wants to do one?
I've been trying to keep my eye on questions like that have come in and articles that I've seen around the country. And, we know that there's a need for housing units and affordable units. So it seems like a great opportunity. The other funding source I thought of, Randy, was National Housing Trust funds, if it was converted into permanent supportive housing. And I know there's a hotel in Lincoln that got a lot of press because it was shut down, and then the owner was putting videos on YouTube. They're actually kind of interesting to watch this transformation of this hotel. And I think prior to the renovation, he was housing a lot of people that were struggling. Unfortunately, the conditions were so bad it was uninhabitable, but it's really transformed. I don't know what it's doing now, but I wonder how many cities have hotels that people are kind of like, what are we going to do? Seems like an opportunity.
And it doesn't have to be just older hotels. I've seen LIHTC projects in old school buildings that turned out to be just amazing. And there's lots of opportunities with old buildings like that. I saw a post office one time that got converted, and it was really cool.
Yeah, That is cool. We've NIFA has been a part of some redevelopment that's pretty amazing that I've learned about since I've been here. Was someone else going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in North Platte, I think we have 6 or 8 of our older motels that have been converted into monthly rent situations. Some of them have been a little better prepared to do that. Some of them have just gone directly into it, and the conditions aren't great, but we're working on that. But it definitely is housing a population that here in North Platte would not be getting housed. Most of them have waiting lists. The rent is really not too bad. They have kitchenettes. So it is taking care of a population that would not otherwise have housing here.
I think there's additional opportunities there for developers and programs who have some of these HUD funds or other specific program funds that can pay rent for folks to partner up. And so a developer could buy a hotel or something, convert it into efficiency apartments or something like that, but partner with a program who has permanent supportive units available, site-based some of those units in that apartment building. So now the program has access to apartments for people, so you know where they can live. That's kind of check one. But the good thing for the project is you kind of have a guaranteed source of rent. So if you did 30 units and 10 of those are now site-based program units, you know that you're going to get paid for those 10 units. That's going to happen. And that really, especially with LIHTC projects and things like that, it helps the cash flow of the projects, but it also provides guaranteed housing for people on the backside. So it's kind of a win-win for the developer and the cash flow of the project, but also gives us additional affordable housing units in the community.
Yeah, and you reminded me of something I was going to say earlier before I got kicked off, but just that balance of it seems like a win-win situation. You have this combination of I have financing to help this tenant, so you're going to get rent paid, plus I'm providing a resource to you because most landlords don't have someone they can call if something doesn't go right or if they have questions or concerns. So you're also providing kind of someone in the life of the tenant that's there to be a support and that resource there, otherwise you're not going to have that. So it just seems like, win-win situation, partnering with landlords and agencies. And then taking it to the extreme, like you're talking about, it actually development with some project-based vouchers, and yeah. And really, that's the theme that kind of led to us scheduling this. Not only was this requested by our attendees of previous webinars, but it's just a topic right now that people are saying is we have tenants, we have rent subsidy money, whether it's housing choice voucher or people call those Section 8 vouchers, and it's hard to find units to place those. And so, hats off to all the work that you're doing. And this is a good balance of what we're talking about, where we have a smaller community that really is addressing an issue and maximizing partnerships. And then you have an agency that's thinking outside the box and providing some contingency funds. And then Randy's role of kind of being this kind of oversight body with all of the continuum of care agencies in Omaha. It's all about partnering together. And so, yeah, I'm just glad you're all here. And I just saw someone posted something about tiny homes, which I love talking about tiny homes. We don't have a tiny home development in Nebraska yet, but we have one under development at Santa Francis House in Omaha. But I know some communities have really expressed interest, whether it would be a tiny home village for a specific targeted population or tiny home houses like infill. I think Randy and I have talked about that before. I don't know, what do you all think of tiny homes? Here's one thing I'll say to Retha specifically, because Retha and I both worked with mental health agencies. But in my experience, housing a person with mental health issues can be challenging in an apartment complex. So finding a little home for someone who struggles with some mental health symptoms, I always coveted those, and I looked all over Nebraska for those when I was housing people. Do you agree with that idea?
Yeah, I like the idea. The idea of having it all like in one area where it's all people that may be struggling with mental health or substance use issues. That I'm not so sure is always a great idea. I've seen where one landlord had one specific apartment that he would allow people to live there that had vouchers through agencies such as ours and other agencies in the community. And that always didn't seem like a great idea. I like the idea of being all inclusive to where you're all over the community and scattered out and not just being in one site. But yeah, I think a little tiny home that kind of helps that person who is struggling maybe with mental health issues to not have the neighbors that might be another issue for them. So I like the idea, but I don't know that I like it to be like one big giant encampment of the same people with the same vouchers coming into.
Yeah, you definitely would have to have that kind of community support. Randy?
I love tiny homes. I love it both as a potential development idea where there's a bunch of them together or as an infill. I think it checks a lot of boxes. I think you can do it in a way that makes it affordable, so that it opens up a whole new batch of housing that is available for people exiting homelessness. But I think there's a lot of other uses too. I don't know that it's as trendy as it was a couple of years ago, but I know for a while it was very trendy among younger folks, maybe college graduates, or just young folks who reduce your carbon footprint, live in a tiny home. It's all cool. But if that is an option for them, then they're maybe not going into more traditional apartments or houses in the community that could be affordable housing for others. I also think it's a great step down for individuals as they get older. And maybe I don't want to rent a 3-bedroom apartment, and a 1-bedroom tiny home would be better suited for my individual needs. And so I think they open up lots of opportunities across the rental spectrum, and I think they can be done very well, whether it's a small development or infill.
I have a friend who's been working on a tiny home development for veterans down in Florida, and it sounds like it's starting to come to fruition and getting developed. And so I've been anxious to have some more conversations with her and kind of see how that has all come together. So, and Nancy Strebel, even though she's retired, still continues to poke me and say, you need to do some kind of development like that. So, it's something that definitely has some interest. So.
Yeah, the person that mentioned tiny homes, it looks like it said, teaching the clients in a village to work together and build them. I mean, that would be really neat.
Yep.
See something like that happen. So we had a tiny home webinar, and so you can find that on YouTube. But I could tell you should check that out. The person's asking the questions because we have some examples. But and Carol, I'm glad you mentioned veterans because that's a good example of housing and services that have been really successful. The Veterans Administration Supportive Housing Program and the developments across Nebraska, which really is helping Nebraska to end veteran homelessness. That's a good combo of service and rent assistance. Hey, Susan, did I miss any questions?
No, I believe we've handled them all.
Okay. Any other last thoughts? We definitely appreciate you all your input today. And I will say to the audience, I mean, we all work diligently to try to increase housing options for people that are extremely low income, that have behavioral health issues, the workforce community, and this team here is just an example of how people work together and collaborate. It's often that each of us will reach out to each other and bring up a scenario. What do I do? You know, can you help this person? So it's just a good example of that partnership. So I guess I'll go ahead and do my outro script if we don't have any other comments. So that completes all the questions from today's presentation. I would like to thank everyone for attending, and a special thank you to our presenters. Also want to take the time to thank our sponsor today, which is Bonneville Multifamily Capital. So thank you. This webinar has been approved for 1.5 hours of continuing legal education. If you neglected to enter your license number, you can contact us after this webinar at outreach@NIFA.org. And we are working on continuing education for other areas too in the future. I want to tell everyone that we have registration open for our 2021 annual low-income housing tax credit compliance training to be held March 15th through 17th, 2021. You can register by going to our website. Lastly, I forgot to mention that all these webinars are recorded. They're on our website. You can go to NIFA.org, Community Development Trainings and Webinars, or you can go to our YouTube channel, which is at NIFA Housing. All of our webinars are on there. We almost have a year of webinars we've done. And we didn't talk about housing.ne.gov, but that's a great resource in Nebraska for people, landlords that want to list properties for free and tenants that need to find units. Definitely check that out. And if you have any questions, you could also reach out to us at our outreach at NIFA.org. Okay, well, thanks everybody. That concludes our webinar for today.